This week's episode of The Obsessive Viewer is sponsored by Westworld FM, the latest podcast from the Midwest Podcast Network. Westworld FM seeks to dissect the latest episode of HBO's Westworld TV series every week. Join Alex and Nick as they take a deep dive into the latest TV show from producers Jonathan Nolan and J.J. Abrams. New episodes of the podcast are available on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and more the day after the TV show airs. Check out the show at westworld.fm or search for Westworld FM on your favorite podcasting service. And thank you to Westworld FM and the Midwest Podcast Network for sponsoring this week's episode. This is Matt Hurt at Obsessive Viewer on Twitter.
This is Tiny at Obsessive Tiny on Twitter.
And this is a bonus episode of ObsessiveViewer.com's The Obsessive Viewer Podcast. Hello and welcome to The Obsessive Viewer. We're a weekly movie and TV podcast that covers a specific topic, be it genre, trope, movie, or show, each episode. You can find back episodes at ovpodcast.com, find the blog at obsessiveviewer.com, and you can like us on Facebook and join the Facebook group at facebook.com/theobsessiveviewer. And I implore you guys to join the Facebook group because that's where we post a lot of good discussions and things like that in the lead up to the episodes for each week.
I think that's one of the best ideas you've ever had. Fuck, I am dumb.
No, that's fine. Like, it's just, I'm laughing because, I mean, thank you. Yeah, that's one of the best ideas I've ever had. I also stole it from another podcast.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's one of the best ideas they've ever had.
Right. Totally.
No, because I like it because, fan interaction is
yeah, totally
huge. And so I like that.
It gives us a way to, let the people like touch us. It's like, this is the equivalent of us like walking past people who are grabbing at our, I don't know.
We're like God.
We are.
And they're like our followers.
Exactly. This is the Church of Obsessive Viewer.
Yeah.
The Facebook group is their confessional. I don't know.
Amen.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, so this week on the podcast, this is actually a bonus episode. We're not having a regular episode this week. This is a bonus episode devoted to Season 1 of HBO's Westworld, the latest original series from HBO from Jonathan Nolan, Lisa Joy, and J.J. Abrams. And before we actually get into the episode, we're gonna be spoiling Westworld for everyone that wants to know that piece of information. We're going to be spoiling the season and kind of dissecting it and talking out our feelings about the season. So if you haven't seen Westworld, I suggest going and checking it out on HBO Go, HBO Now, or if you're listening to this in the future on Blu-ray or what have you. But we'll let you know when we start spoiling it, but we'll do like a brief spoiler-free thing. But Tiny, even though this is a bonus episode, I kind of want to do a little quick news segment because there was a piece of news that dropped.
Okay.
That's somewhat related to Westworld in a way, sort of. HBO is developing a space drama from J.J. Abrams' Bad Robot and writer Javier Guillen. Did you hear about this?
I have not heard about this.
Okay, cool. So, real quick, the space drama is titled Glare, and it's in development at HBO, and it's a sci-fi odyssey exploring the colonization of another planet. And so that's kind of all the details that I have here in front of me. And yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. Just the idea of HBO having a space drama and the fact that they're a new space drama on TV, I'm all for it. So
wow.
Well, how do you feel about this, Tiny?
Man, they're so ballsy at HBO. It's crazy because they have, Game of Thrones, big fantasy, a lot of huge budget, lots of stuff. Westworld, same thing. And now a space one, like it's all CG, going to be a bunch of CGI. Like,
oh yeah,
that's just impressive to me that they're throwing, it's just the scope of their projects really impressed me. So that's great to hear.
I agree.
Is the writer Javier, is he like famous for anything?
He is. I'm so glad you asked me.
I just put you on the spot, didn't I?
You did, and I closed out the thing.
Damn.
I know. Thank you.
Yeah. So while you're looking at that up, Javier translates from Spanish. I have no idea what Javier means. I don't know.
I don't know either. He has multiple. I'm reading from an article from Deadline. He has multiple produced features overseas. That is a weird sentence. Drew Hollywood attention recently with his dramatic thriller spec script 478, which was made with Arnold Schwarzenegger and set for release next year.
Interesting.
Yeah, and he recently adapted the novel The Dark Side, a sci-fi noir set on the moon.
Wow.
That little sentence right there, a sci-fi noir set on the moon. That sells me.
Yeah.
And it's still in development, but that sounds awesome. This is his first foray into TV, and he also wrote the Denis Villeneuve directed movie Enemy. Did you ever see Enemy with Jake Gyllenhaal?
No, never saw that one.
I haven't seen it either, even though I'm a Villeneuve fan. And I respect his work and everything. Yeah. I have this weird thing. I heard that something about the movie deals with spiders, and it's like I'm too hesitant to see it.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, I just can't. I'll see it eventually, though. Sure.
Yeah.
So I thought that was cool. That was kind of something that's somewhat related to this, since Westworld is a Bad Robot, J.J. Abrams produced thing, and it's in the same wheelhouse of obviously science fiction on HBO.
Uh-huh.
So we'll see how Glare goes. Okay, so we are going to talk about Westworld today. I promise. And before we do that, Tiny, did you ever see the original? Have I asked you that before? The original 1973 film?
I have not. You asked me because I think you brought it up for Potpourri.
I did
on a past episode.
Yeah, I did, and I can't remember how I phrased it or what I said when I brought it up on Potpourri. But just to reiterate, it seemed like a testing ground for Crichton to test out his Jurassic Park idea.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, it's about robots, a robot theme park that, is overruled by the robots. Disaster at a theme park. And the concept is great in it, and the execution wasn't that great at all. So I was really excited for Westworld, the TV show, because it's a brilliant concept, and it's something that I thought could have flourished in a long form narrative structure such as HBO, especially on HBO Premium Cable. What was your expectations going into Westworld?
My expectations were really high, just given all of the glamour involved with all the factors, all the variables. There's a ridiculously good cast, super great production, writers, and it's on HBO. So it's like, it's got all these great things working for us. So like, this had better be really good because just because of all those things. So I had really high expectations for it.
Nice. So the TV show Westworld promised to be, a good adaptation of that. So Tiny, this ran for 10 episodes. How did you consume it week to week?
I did, yeah.
Okay, and how did you feel about the show overall? Kind of in broad terms, and then we'll go into a more nuanced spoiler discussion.
It actually wasn't as great or amazing as I had hoped it was going to be. It didn't quite meet my expectations.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think the context of it is both good and bad, because you mentioned how the movie didn't quite deliver on the subject matter, wasn't it needed long form storytelling. I feel like maybe this would have been perfect for a miniseries, like tell the whole thing in 10 episodes. I feel like it's they drew a lot of things out. Some of the mysteries were revealed very slowly, and I don't know. I just feel like it could have been a much tighter series, as opposed to drawing. It could have been a much tighter miniseries as opposed to drawing out a whole series over seasons. But that's just me, and it remains to be seen what direction they're going to take. in future seasons, it could totally turn around and be a completely different animal. I think this first season involved a lot of setup for things. So I still liked the show a lot, and I think it's a good show. There's a lot of things that you can point to that are very high quality and really well done. But again, it didn't blow me away like I wanted it to.
I don't know why, but I'm kind of surprised to hear that.
Really?
Yeah, I'm very curious how this, the rest of this is going to pan out. It's interesting that, real quick, we were supposed to have frequent guest Thicke on the show today, but he ended up having to work cover a shift, so he couldn't make it. And I really wish he could have made it, because this would have been really interesting, because I know that he was a big fan of the show. But as for me, my overall thoughts are, I really liked a lot of elements of the show. I really did. There were some things about it that I was really hooked into and really interested in. However, I will say that I find that there were several things about it that I found problematic, from a storytelling level and from a general plotting element as well.
Okay.
Which we'll talk about in more detail, I'm sure. But there were some elements that I thought were just problematic from even kind of from the start. And it's worth noting that this show did take an extended hiatus in terms of production. Like, they took I think it was like close to a year break in production partway through filming, so that they could hammer out the details of an extended series, multiple season arcs and everything.
Wow.
So I think that may be part of what I had taken issue with. Some of the things I took issue with throughout the season could be explained by that thing, but I also had some other qualms with it, but it wasn't anything that necessarily broke the show for me, not completely, but I came away from it at the end of the season being very intrigued by what the show could become, but ultimately a little bit let down by what the show was at this point. And also, I think it's best to keep this aside, keep one part of my qualms with it completely pushed aside until the end. But I found myself kind of, not irritated or annoyed, but kind of, it made me come to a realization about the way that I consume television, in terms of the audience reaction to it, or the general internet buzz machine, about it. I kind of had some things during the season that I felt this show made me wish that I watched it in a vacuum.
Okay.
It made me kind of yearn for the Netflix model where they throw everything online, and this is a fault on me as a viewer, but I clued into some of the conversation surrounding the show, and I think that impacted my enjoyment of the show in a negative way, which I'll talk more about that later. It has nothing to do with the actual product of the show, but that is a thing that I'm going to have to adjust my viewing habits, and we'll talk about that later after the actual review of the show, because I don't want to mix in commentary or commentary on the social aspect of it in terms of viewership with actual criticisms about the actual product. So we'll save that for later.
Okay.
But overall, I thought that this was a solid first season for a show that I think could grow into a really incredible experience going forward. But that it's not without its problems, and there were some pretty big problems that I thought there were. So we, at this point, will dive into spoilers. But before we do that, I actually posed a question on the Facebook group. I was super late doing it this week.
You were.
Yeah, I was. So we didn't get that many responses. We just got a couple, but I just want to read them here on the Facebook group, which of course you can find at facebook.com/theobsessiveviewer. There's a link to the group pinned to the top of that Facebook page. If you're listening to this and you like what we do, go join the group because you'll get, we can include your thoughts in our episodes and everything. So I asked people, what they thought of the show and what they thought of the phenomenon of internet theorizing, which is what we'll talk about later in this episode.
Okay.
So Chad from the Secular Perspective podcast and Chad and Amanda Talk Shit About said, I have literally seen every episode twice. I love the way the finale played out and ended. Even though a new season is coming, the season ended in such a way that it could be canceled tomorrow, and I would still be happy with how the series ended. Look forward to getting it on Blu-ray and for the extras. And then Brandon Cruz, fellow podcaster over at Apathetic Enthusiasm and fellow Twilight Zone podcaster at Submitted for Your Approval, a Twilight Zone podcast. Both podcasts that I highly recommend. And I've been a guest on Submitted for Your Approval. And he's actually going to be a guest on my solo project podcast anthology here in a few weeks. So anyway, Brandon wrote, these violent delights have violent ends. The trend of internet theorizing has existed for a long time. Lost anyone? And he said, I think it's awesome and a great way to throw back to the water cooler discussions of television. Just happens to be the internet. So, okay, let's see. Where was I? We're going to go ahead and dive into the spoiler discussion now. So if you don't want to be spoiled on Westworld, tune out. If you don't care or you want to, or if you've seen it, continue listening. We'll put a little break here for people to tune out if they need the time to grab their phone or whatever.
Do you know where you are?
I'm in a dream.
You're in my dream. I designed every part of this place. Not a theme park, but an entire world.
You and everyone you know were built to gratify the desires of the people who pay to visit your world.
Just don't forget, they're not real.
So one of the big things about this season of the show, this first season of the show, is that there are multiple timelines going on throughout it. And the first thing I want to ask really Tiny is, how did you feel about that and the reveal of it kind of at the end? How did you feel about the plotting of the season as a whole?
You know, I liked the reveal in the finale that they showed the multiple timelines. I didn't see that coming.
Interesting.
I didn't see that coming at all. I really didn't. And I think I enjoyed that I enjoyed that a lot. Like I wasn't like, oh my God, really? It didn't blow my mind, but I was like, wow, that was clever. I did not see that coming. And I appreciated the characterization of it, the way the parallels. I thought they were really well done. So I liked that. But I just think just the concept of the grand conflict of this first season was a mental conflict, if you will.
Which conflict?
Well, I mean, the maze.
Yeah.
Was a mental thing. And it's just like, that's so hard to do. It's so hard to represent a mental struggle, I guess, or coming to an epiphany can be hard to depict visually. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, and I feel like they failed in that respect. The realization that Dolores came to, which is kind of the linchpin of the first season, the maze, and I felt it was built up a ridiculous amount. And I enjoyed some of the build up, but I feel like they just didn't reveal enough pieces of it to us throughout the season to keep us really interested. I think I was a little frustrated as a viewer that I couldn't piece anything. There were no pieces to put together in a puzzle. It was like they just showed you the whole puzzle at the end. And maybe that's a mischaracterization, but that's kind of how I felt. I felt like it wasn't revealed in pieces, and they didn't let the viewer participate in that respect. So that I struggled with that in regards to the maze and Dolores. But I really enjoyed Jimmy Simpson and Ed Harris, that storyline, his character, I enjoyed that quite a bit.
Really, this is really interesting because I would take it to mean that you weren't actively participating in any discussion of the show or any internet theorizing or anything.
No.
Okay, and
I did kind of watch it in a vacuum, to use your term.
That is great.
I made no attempt to do any of that.
Okay, and that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Good on you.
Thank you.
Yeah, because when episode 2 aired, everyone on the internet was saying, "Oh, Jimmy Simpson is the old man in black."
Really?
Or the young man in black, yeah.
Oh, wow.
And the reason is because in the second episode, when he arrives at Westworld, and he's being greeted by the robot that's telling him, the host that's telling him, introducing him to the park and having him pick out all of his attire and everything. In the background, the logo is the old logo. And It's not only that, but HBO actually seems like they got a little cocky, and they actually like tweeted out or something saying like, in Westworld, even logos deserve a second look. So like the internet hive mind is like, oh, let's look at the logos. Oh, this is an old logo. This isn't the like regular logo that we're used to seeing, or that's in the branding for the TV show and the marketing and stuff. Mm-hmm. So clearly, this entire timeline this entire story arc is taking place 30 years in the past, and that's. I don't mind and we won't talk more about the internet or anything, but I wish I would have watched it in a vacuum. But also, I feel like if I had watched it in a vacuum. And this isn't meant to be a dig at you at all or anything. Okay. But I feel like me personally, if I had watched it in a vacuum, I think I would have picked up on it, at least by episode 8 or 9. Because they were laying it on pretty thick. And granted, I was watching it with that in my head. So I was like, not looking for clues, but I was pointing out in my head, like clues that to support that thesis, that theory. And also, it was pretty apparent throughout it that Jimmy Simpson's whole story arc, I mean, that was in a vacuum itself. That was self-contained. That was completely away from everything else that was going on. And I think that that's one of the problems that I had with the show overall, is that it was juggling a lot. And like we had the whole Bernard and Teresa thing, the whole board thing. Anthony Hopkins as Ford doing his own thing separate from everyone else. We had 3 different timelines of things going on from the present day to the past with Jimmy Simpson, and the whole thing with Dolores talking to Arnold. And we had another board person. We had a security guy that was one of the Hemsworths. That was kind of thrown away at the end. Yeah. We had just a lot of stuff going on. And one of my big faults with the show is that it's great to have those things. It's great to have those different things and juggle them if you can juggle them well. And at times the show juggled them pretty well. But my big issue, and this could be nitpicking, but I feel like they didn't do justice to the setting in the way, or in the world building in a way that was satisfactory to me, because this concept it's a very high concept thing. It's very much suspension of disbelief is needed as soon as you get off the train to Westworld. Like you need to suspend your disbelief, but I feel like they didn't set up enough rules for the park itself to really make it that engaging to me. Like there's something to be said about having people in a park who can shoot these human-like creatures, but I don't know, it seemed like the show didn't spend enough time setting up like, well, how is it possible that they can do these things to the hosts, but what fail-safes are in place to keep the guests free or keep the guests safe and everything? Like, how does it operate like this? And I mean, yeah, there are some like little explanations here and there. You can't fire the gun at a human guest, I guess, or you can, but it doesn't hit them. Like if you have certain pain, I think that this is explained in the show, but you can set the guests can set their pain tolerance to a certain level so that like their injuries can be, increased and stuff. And like all that stuff is okay, but also when you late in the show, when you're introducing things like arrows and samurai world, which how could that possibly be? How can that possibly exist when it's not gunfights and stuff? It's sword play.
Right.
So I think that the show, while juggling a lot of different things, really faltered in setting up the world, which I think that is one of the biggest issues that I had with it. It was that I wanted to be really invested in this world that had been set up, but I feel like I was asking a lot more questions about how it operates when that's something that kind of should have been covered in the first couple episodes. And they do cover a little bit here and there. But it wasn't to a satisfying extent for me.
I can second that as well. I think it's weird to say, but I think it's too Westworld itself is too fantastical.
Right.
It's too much fantasy. Like you can literally do whatever you want. You can explore any of the most taboo things you could possibly want to do. I mean, it goes way beyond just, killing someone. You can torture someone forever. You can do the most gross taboo things you can think of. And you can do them with no consequences and no risk.
Right.
And that's just too much. Like it's like an unsustainable, like it's an untenable thing.
Sure.
And I think that's part of why those flaws stuck out so much and why it's such a flawed premise to begin with.
Right.
You have to be ridiculously skilled storyteller to pull that off.
Right. And that's what I mean by saying that I could be nitpicking the whole thing.
I don't think you're nitpicking though. I think they could have changed some of the rules, if you will, some of the parameters of the story to make it a little more interesting or a little more risky, a little more intriguing. And
it gets to the point where it's more, I mean, it kind of embraces the fantastic science fiction element to it that, I mean, like when you have Ford and later on Maeve being able to essentially control the hosts just by waving their hands. Like, I mean, granted, there is like that's not too much of a stretch because I mean we have, you can set it up to sense hand movements and stuff or sense commands like that.
Right.
People at Harry Potter World can do that with wands that they buy, but it's something that it's kind of seems more like they're embracing that rather than, answering questions, which is fine. It's fine. Later on, we will compare this to Lost in a way, at least I will. And I'm completely aware that I am the pot calling the kettle black because I'm telling the audience I'm telling our listeners that I have a problem with the show for raising too many questions when I was a huge fan of Lost.
Right.
But anyway, to your point about the maze plotline and how the whole structure, it was really difficult to show this emotional or mental journey that Dolores was going on. I agree with you. That is a very, very tricky thing to handle and to achieve. I think my kind of problem with that, and I swear this is not going to be a dumping ground for all of the problems I have for the show, but I think the issue that arises with me is that we are led to believe that the maze itself is something that the Man in Black is in pursuit of, he is in pursuit of it, but I get the sense that like all of that was a complete misdirect. That was a MacGuffin for the Man in Black. It was really a journey for Dolores, which that's fine. That's totally fine. But I feel like the payoff of that, reveal that it was for Dolores to gain sentience, and the reveal of the purpose of the meaning behind the maze design and how it was about Arnold's kid and all that. That just it just didn't land with me. It really didn't. Yeah, I was just kind of more confused than anything.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I mean, I was too. Yeah, I thought it was, I used the word untenable. And it was just kind of, I don't know, it was almost like just kind of strung together, which is an interesting analogy given the way the hosts are built.
Right.
I didn't think it was a great payoff either.
Right.
Yeah. But I feel like, again, I think I said this at the beginning, I think there's just a lot of setup with the first season, and I feel like after HBO has this thing where after episodes they have the producers and actors and directors and whatnot do a little talk and stuff like that. They do it with Game of Thrones and some other shows, and they do it with this, which is nice. And after the finale, Jonathan Nolan said the first season was all about control, and the second season is going to be all about chaos. So I have a feeling that maybe they're kind of saving a lot of their flair or a lot of their whatever, their energy for the second season, and the first season was a lot of setup. So
sure.
I feel like that could very well be the case, and maybe 5 years from now when they conclude the series or whatever, we may have a completely different opinion where it's like, well, the first season was a little iffy, but 2 through 5 were awesome. You know, I feel like that's a real possibility.
I agree. And I hope that for the show for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that I can see that it being a lot of setup for seasons to come. Like that's definitely true. I think that is the case and everything. My bigger issue with that is that the setup was kind of shoddy, in my opinion.
Okay.
Because let's go back to the dueling timelines thing. The conceit that the Man in Black is an older version of Jimmy Simpson's character William from his time at the park. We're seeing throughout the season, we see his first time at the park and how it changes him from being a quote unquote white hat to a black hat, which that's kind of the, I guess, not difficulty level, but the kind of like characters that they're playing quote unquote in the park. So he is going there with the brother of his fiance, Logan, who is a black hat who just wants to fucking kill anyone that's there the whole time. And the storyline, if you isolate the storyline of Jimmy Simpson's character, his version of the Man in Black, the William character, like that arc is really satisfying to me in a vacuum in itself. Because you get to see him adapt to this world, or he's like working through what it is the theme park does. And he even says at one point that it doesn't, I can't remember the exact phrasing, but he says that it reveals your true self, the park does. And I liked that a lot. I did, and I liked the reveal at the end that that we've been seeing a flashback to the Man in Black. My problem is that is contingent on the cleverness of the storyline or the storytelling. They made a guess that let's be clever and let's conceal this backstory and have people think that he is a separate character, and then let's reveal at the end that he has been the backstory for who could be the main protagonist or one of the protagonists of the show, potentially. His morality center's a little gray.
Right.
But I think the big fault of it and the big problem that I had with that is that you can do that. You can have a season-long TV show where you are showing flashbacks to a character's past. We referenced Lost.
Yeah.
That was one of the biggest things about Lost. I believe Orange is the New Black does that as well. Has flashbacks to characters' backstories throughout it. I haven't seen Orange is the New Black, but
it does, and they use it pretty well in that show.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. My problem with Westworld is that they made the point to conceal it throughout the entire season. And in doing that, it's not constructive to the storytelling of the characterization of Ed Harris's character, because even though the internet and everyone knew, or like people who like browse Reddit and stuff knew that
I'm stupid. Yeah. You can just say it.
No, that's not the case. But because people figured it out early, you can retroactively say like, oh, this is great backstory for the character. But watching it without having that be completely clear to you from the outset, it's kind of just not retconning the season, but it's throwing you tons of exposition in that moment where there's the reveal that he's the Man in Black. So watching it, and maybe Tiny, you can talk about this because I've been talking a lot and I haven't been giving you a chance to respond. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
When the reveal happens that you see that he is William, the Man in Black is William, at that point, from my perspective, being if you're in the vacuum and you're watching it in a vacuum, you just get bombarded with the fact that the last 9 episodes has all been backstory for the Ed Harris character. Did you feel overwhelmed by that? Did you experience that reaction, I should say?
I don't think I'd use the word overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. I one of the things about the reveal that I liked is that Ed Harris, old man in black, says that he's gone through a similar journey with Dolores before, meaning she's gotten close to finding the maze or concluding the maze, if you will, several times throughout all the years he's been in the park.
I think he was just referring to that one time, right? He's been there before with her.
Oh, I guess.
Is that what he said? Yeah.
So I guess I misinterpreted that.
Oh.
But I don't know. I think you're right that to lay it out that you're looking at 2 different storylines, I think probably would have been more satisfactory. I think they were going for the big reveal. Mm-hmm. They wanted the big twist moment, if you will, and it just didn't. It apparently for a majority of the viewers it didn't work out that way. But even for the viewers like myself where it did work out, like I said, it didn't blow me away. I wasn't absolutely stunned by it. And there were moments throughout Lost where they used the format that you mentioned, where it's, the past is in real time influencing the real time, or present day. I was more blown away by some of those scenarios in Lost. And so, it's different. I guess their gamble just didn't really pay off. And I think they could have gone the other way and have, reveal it. They could have still had a pretty big reveal at the end of the first or second episode. Mm-hmm. And then from there, just have the past directly influencing the present like they've done with other shows. And I think it could have been more satisfactory and it could have built the character better, I think.
Right. And I think one of the other problems is that it's not only a surprise reveal that the Man in Black is William. I think it's also the surprise that Dolores has been on this journey this whole time, because it's both showing the present day and in the past. In the past, she's going with William to the spot where the maze is, where the church is. But the whole time in the present day, we're seeing her do this herself. It all becomes really convoluted and confusing.
Yeah.
And it was frustrating to me. I don't know what else to say about that, but to heap praise on the show, though, to spin things into a positive.
Yeah.
For me personally, and granted, and this is interesting because you and I have not talked about the show at all. Until this recording.
I haven't. I really haven't.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing. Like we haven't talked about it with each other.
Right.
And how did you feel about the reveal that Bernard is a host?
That one I sort of saw coming. I was like,
okay.
It's a given that one of these main characters is a host. Like, it's going to happen. I was like, it's not. I highly doubt that it's Ford, but it could be. I was like, so it's probably the director lady or Bernard or Shannon Woodward. It's got to be one of those people. And so when it was revealed, I liked the way they did it, where he said, "Doesn't look like anything to me." I was like, "Oh snap!" Yeah. I genuinely liked that quite a bit, but I wasn't blown away.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
I wasn't. I wouldn't say that I was blown away, but I was really satisfied with it. Again, and I swear I don't mean to do this, but some of the problems I had with it. No, I had one little nitpick to it when he basically the scene unfolds where he is going with he's showing Teresa, the board member person, the house that Ford has kept his host family, essentially his young version of himself as a host, and his family been keeping them. So he's showing her that, and then the thing that I loved was the moment that kind of tipped my hat to it. It wasn't this doesn't look like anything to me, even though that scene is like the solidified thing. It's the scene earlier when they're in the house and Teresa says, "What's behind this door?" And Bernard just says, What door? And I'm like, that blew my mind. I was like, holy shit, he doesn't see the door because the hosts can't see things that would harm them, or that they only see certain things.
Right.
So I'm like, he's a freaking host. That's amazing.
Nice.
Yeah, but the problem that I had with that is that probably maybe 3 lines before that, Bernard says the line, hosts only see what they want, or something like that, or they don't see. Like, I wish that idea was seeded deeper in an earlier episode.
Yeah.
And I think that payoff would have been a lot better.
True.
Yeah, but the reveal that he's a host changed the game for the rest of the season and changed the show in a good way for me. I thought that was a really great way to kind of rejuvenate my interest in the show at that point in time. Mm-hmm. And it revealed Ford's character more because he had Bernard murder Teresa, which I didn't care one way or another about that character.
Yeah.
And then she was just like, it felt like they were just replacing her with Tessa Thompson's character anyway.
Yeah.
It just seemed like that it was kind of a useless character death. And I kind of wish that, again, this is kind of going into the talk about what I think we're going to talk about later in this recording, but there was like discussion about the fact that in that basement of that house, you see in the background that Ford is creating a host.
Right.
You see the like 3D printer, and people were theorizing that he's making a Teresa host.
I thought that
to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that would have been a cool plot element.
Yeah.
But that didn't come to pass, which is fine. But I thought that it was kind of weird that the explanation the next episode is, Teresa fell and hit her head, so she's dead.
Right.
Yeah, and that kind of, I don't know, that was kind of empty to me, and we're jumping around a lot, so I apologize for the lack of consistency here, but that kind of brings me to another point of contention that I have with this season as a whole. That reaction, it seemed to be a running theme. Did you pick up on this at all, Tiny? How death of actual character, like humans in the show, didn't have any emotional impact for the other humans in the show? Did you pick up on that at all?
I did, and I think part of it is because I feel like almost every character in the show was just not very likable that much. Like they all seemed very unhappy. Mm-hmm. Which is really crazy, again, given that we're talking about the most perfect fantasy world you can imagine. Like, it's crazy that you would think you have complete fantasy fulfillment here, that these people would be constantly smiling from ear to ear and be so fulfilled and happy, but literally no one in this whole show is happy. Young Jimmy Simpson is for like a little bit, but it lasts like half an episode, and then things go to shit again, and everybody's pissed off, and it's just like, I think maybe that was part of it, but yeah, and like I thought it was weird, like this lady died. Like, are there no fucking cops in the future? What the hell's going on? Yeah. So it was, I definitely noticed that.
Yeah, I think to your point, the only happy person in this show is Ed Harris at the end, and that's because he got shot in the arm.
Which I loved that.
I loved that. I loved that
acting.
So
he was
great.
like, he looked like he opened a Christmas present and got a puppy. Like, that's what he looked like. It was so funny.
Like that was it. That might be one of my favorite moments of the entire season.
Yeah.
Just that look of glee was just perfect.
Right.
But yeah, and to leapfrog off of that, the whole idea of death in the season of humans, death of humans, not resonating with other humans, I feel like that maybe the show, and maybe I'm giving them too much credit, but I feel like the show is trying to make a statement about it. Like these characters who are witnessing this death or seeing these deaths, they're so desensitized to it because of where they work and where they are. Mm-hmm. But also that didn't make any sense or didn't track throughout it because they're still human beings.
Yeah.
And it's not like we see the characters that are working for the park in the park all the time. But probably my biggest issue with the entire season was the Maeve plotline with Thandie Newton, who apparently her name is pronounced Tandy Newton.
Yeah,
I didn't know that until I heard it on podcast.
Damn Brits.
Yep. So Thandie Newton, her acting was out of this world.
Yeah.
She was phenomenal, and her character was one that I latched onto more than maybe most of the other characters, save for maybe Bernard. Because Jeffrey Wright is awesome. The cast is incredible in general.
Mm-hmm.
But the breakout sequence, everything from the moment that she manipulated Felix, the technician guy, and Sylvester, I think was his name.
Yeah.
The other guy. Those two characters, I've never been like those characters almost ruined the show for me.
Really?
Yeah, because I didn't understand why they were so enamored with her. Like there's some seeds there for why. Like he is trying to reanimate this dead bird, and he's trying to, get a leg up in the company and everything, but he's also like, okay, well, we're going to reprogram this host so that she can manipulate human beings or manipulate other hosts and stuff and stage this uprising. And like the whole thing felt more plot driven than anything.
Right.
And even when they break out and we see his just dumbass expression on his face the entire time, not saying a word, not reacting in any way, is also an extension of what I think could be a commentary on just how humans react to violence in this world and everything. But also, it doesn't work for me, like, because it did not track. And I promise I'll let you talk in a second.
No, it's okay.
And then that whole sequence ends with them in the elevator. In Thandie Newton looking, or Maeve, I'll say character names, turning to Felix and saying, "Felix, you're a terrible human being, and I mean that as a compliment, I guess," is what she said, I think. And I'm like, that, you can say it, like, yeah, he is, but that does not absolve the poor plotting of the episode or of that storyline.
Yeah.
How did you feel about that whole element of the season?
Yeah, the two technician guys were the two worst characters in the whole fucking show.
Yeah.
They were so one note. I mean, the Sylvester guy, it was like good cop, bad cop.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous. I really, the only time I appreciated what those characters went through is when kind of the climax of that storyline was happening, where I think the blonde character, Armistice, was that her name?
Armistice, yeah.
Armistice, and
which there was a great comment on. It was like on a Periscope that a podcaster did after. Anyway, I saw a great comment where at the end of the season, did you see the after credits thing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Where she cuts her arm off to get away.
Yeah.
Someone commented and said, I guess it's more like, istis.
Nice.
So dumb.
I love that.
Anyway, yeah. What about her?
The moment where Armistice and Hector, played by Rodrigo Santoro, where they were kind of like Maeve's pawns and were like her bodyguards almost, and they were killing that one dude, and like they were butt naked and just like that violence, and they were threatening the Sylvester character. That's the only time where I appreciated what those characters did, because I don't know, just the threat they felt, I guess. I don't know. I appreciated that moment and those moments in that episode. But other than that, like I really just like you said, the motivation was just odd. I didn't understand their motivations for doing what they did, and I think the actors were fine. The one dude, Sylvester, his name is Ptolemy Slocum. That's an interesting name. Yeah. He's a great actor, and like I've seen him in other things, and he's great. And the other guy who played Felix was good too. I'm not trying to knock them down or anything, but the writing just wasn't there for those characters. I agree. And if the purpose of that was to show that these humans are desensitized to violence, either if it's because of where they are and the world of Westworld has desensitized them to violence or the work that they do, I also get the sense that there was like that could be a cop-out. Because I feel like part of it was, and maybe I'm looking a little bit too into it than anything, but I kind of feel like part of the reason why
Felix helped them or helped Maeve so much is because I feel like it was planted in it that he didn't have access to the park the way that the guests did. And maybe he didn't understand what was going on. But I also think that may have been my brain trying to put meaning behind his inaction and his dopey expression of and not being completely inactive and all of that. Because the shock wasn't there for me. Like he didn't seem like he was in shock. It just seemed like he was just along for the ride, and they didn't put purpose behind any of his actions. And I don't know. You can fill in the blanks all you want with what you think that it was supposed to be. But at the end of the day, for me, I honestly think that it was just lackluster writing.
Yeah.
Which is a shame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned the acting, specifically of Tanya Newton, and that was probably my favorite thing about this show, or at least this season, was the actors who played the hosts, most notably Tanya Newton, Evan Rachel Wood, and Jeffrey Wright. Their ability to switch on and off, turn certain emotions on and off, and do complete 180s at the drop of a hat was just so brilliant.
Absolutely.
I am not an actor. I've never really attempted to act, but I can only imagine what you have to mentally and emotionally do to yourself to get to the apex of like emotional pain that like Evan Rachel Wood and Tanya Newton felt at certain points throughout the season. Yeah. Tanya Newton losing her daughter and Evan Rachel Wood being sexually assaulted and other horrible things, watching her father get killed and stuff like that over and over again. You know, as an actor, you get yourself to that emotional level, and then at the drop of a hat, you shut it off and you go stone-faced. Like, that is... I can only imagine that is just, like, the pinnacle of acting ability, because that just seems so difficult to me. And to watch them... To me, Evan Rachel Wood stood out the most, which might be biased, because I've been a huge fan of hers forever. I think she mastered that to... just like an unbelievable level. I was so impressed with her ability to do that. And my favorite moments of the series were like when they were like in analysis mode and they were asking them to like basically go in and out of character. And like one moment they're playing a character and the next moment it's like you're talking to Siri, like talking to a computer. Like that just blew me away. And I loved those moments. I was like on the edge of my seat, like with my chin resting on my fist, like, what is he gonna... Oh, that's so cool how she's doing that. Like, I guess just from a technical aspect, I just loved that. And I hope there's more of that in the future, but we'll see.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. The acting in this season was fantastic.
Yeah.
The things that the actors playing the hosts had to do is nothing short of astounding and breathtaking. Like, that was fantastic. And you mentioned Siri. Tiny, have you asked your phone? Have you asked Siri what she thinks of Westworld?
No, but I saw online.
Did you? Damn! I was hoping that you hadn't.
They programmed some stuff for her to say. Yeah, I saw that.
It's like if you ask Siri, like, Siri, what do you think of Westworld or something, and then I think Siri's response will be to say, that doesn't look like anything to me, or something like that.
Yeah, that's pretty.
But that's pretty good. That's clever.
Yeah, it is.
I was hoping that you hadn't seen that so that you could have tried it, but whatever.
That's one of the few things I did see about this show outside of the show itself. Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. So one of the things that I really enjoyed about the show was the misdirect at the beginning, the first scene of the episode of the show. So in the 1973 movie, Yul Brynner plays the Man in Black, who is this robot who malfunctions and goes on a killing spree, and stuff happens. So what I loved about it was that opening scene had James Marsden as Teddy on the train getting into Westworld, or going into Sweetwater is the town's name. He goes through a simple day in the town. He meets Dolores, and then they ride off to her house, to her farmhouse, and then it's being attacked by people. So he goes and saves the day, and he rescues her from harm. And then the Man in Black, played by Ed Harris, comes along, and they have this dialogue. And what I loved about that is it subverted the expectations that I had, because it's setting up and Tiny, you can speak to whether or not you have. That sounds terrible. Tiny, you can speak.
Thank you.
No, you can.
Thank you, sir.
You can. I'm curious if you had the same experience, but seeing Ed Harris come up, I was like, okay, well, he's playing the Man in Black. He's going to be a host. And then the reveal that Teddy was the host and Ed Harris was the human. I thought that was such a clever way to bring us into the story, and it seeded the idea that any character that you're watching could secretly be a host. How did you feel about that opening scene? How do you think it was to set the stage for the season as a whole?
Well, I totally had the same notion, but I think for you it was probably more potent because you had the context of the original movie,
right?
Which I've never seen. So I had no idea that in the original, the Man in Black was a host. So I didn't know that going in, but you don't need that because, you would think that your opening scene, you would have, as the viewer, you would be watching a human going into the park.
Right.
And that's what they show you, someone going into the park and entering the park for the first time. And so you automatically think, okay, he's a human and we're going to watch his experience inside the park. Right. So I had that same reaction to it. I was like, whoa, they just kind of flipped the script. And, but again, didn't blow me away. I hate to keep saying that. I hate to keep pounding that nail, but still, yeah, I think it was a good entrance to the series. Yeah,
I agree. And I keep wanting, like, on another podcast I listen to, they always do a joke where it's like they say one thing but they mean another thing. So I keep making it in my head, like I saw a work of art that was based on a previous work adapted from, or was based on a previous work by an acclaimed author that features a mysterious character called the Man in Black. It's a Western setting with some very heavy science fiction elements here.
Nice. But
enough about the Dark Tower. Let's talk about Westworld.
Nice.
But yeah, anyway, that's neither here nor there. But anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I thought that set things up pretty well from a story perspective, but also it kind of, again, I hate to kind of turn every compliment around on itself to be a critique, but I think that also kind of set the stage for the show to be ultimately disappointing from a narrative perspective for me, because that introductory scene, that's only introducing one character that has meaning for the whole show. That's the introduction to the Man in Black. And granted, it also is the introduction to Dolores, but she's the damsel in that segment. And I feel like in any other show, you would have the opening scene be the introduction of your protagonist or the character that you would follow through the rest of the season, which to an extent that is what it is with the Man in Black. But he is introduced as this villainous character, and it's not anything that can really hook us in. Like you talked about how we see Teddy arrive at Sweetwater, and he's the human character from our perspective. And yeah, he is in that moment our conduit, the audience surrogate for the show. But then that's flipped on its ear, and then at that point we don't have like an audience conduit.
True.
And I think that that's one of the problems with the whole season, is that we didn't have anyone to really latch onto except for William, but his storyline was isolated from everything else going on. And then everything else has this shroud of mystery. Like we have Ford's storyline, which we'll get into, and I felt that was really convoluted, which we'll get to that, but we have Ford, we have Bernard, we have Maeve, her whole storyline. We have Shannon Woodward's character, Elsie, and also Luke Hemsworth's character, Stubbs, who both of those characters are completely dropped, kind of unceremoniously.
Yeah.
And it's just, they're juggling so much, and it's at the detriment to the show as a whole, because I didn't have anything to really latch onto. I was watching it for the mystery of what's going on and all of the different things that they're throwing at me in terms of these little turns in the plot and everything. But ultimately, it got kind of exhausting keeping all the balls in the air without having anything meaty to really sink my teeth into. That whole phrasing could
your analogies crossed a little bit there.
A little bit, yeah. But
I know what you're saying, though.
Yeah, there were too many balls and not enough shaft.
Too many side dishes, not enough steak.
Exactly, yes. Yeah, and so let's talk about Elsie and the control room people, or the people behind the scenes of Westworld. And then let's stop talking about them entirely, because that's what the show kind of did. That's harsh, but the Elsie character I thought was the closest thing to an audience surrogate that we got in the show. And I loved Shannon Woodward's performance, and I loved the writing for that character, because she's this smart ass like tech person, who she's the only one that's noticing what's going on, or noticing that something's amiss. And I thought that was a really interesting hook for the show. And then she's dropped completely, and it's implied that she's killed, but who knows? What did you think of that? How did you feel about that characterization and that storyline throughout the season?
I thought she and Stubbs were very expositive characters.
Sure.
They were cogs, you know, in the grander machine, if you will. So they were used, basically just used to relay information to the audience a little bit lazily, if you ask me. And they were used by other characters to get to certain destinations. They were, you could use Teddy in the same way, but he was a little bit better. I think he had some meat on his character that he could sink his teeth into, to stick with that analogy.
Sure.
But yeah, I just felt like, you know, I don't know. I felt like they were, again, kind of one-dimensional, kind of one-note characters, and they basically were used to stumble upon information and relay that information to other characters without assigning too much depth to them. And they were like expositive characters. That's what I would say. And I think it's a shame, because Shannon Woodward, another actress who I'm a huge fan of, and I think is
me too,
an incredible character actor. And I think she could have used a lot more to do. She was turning out to be a very well-rounded character she was shaping up to possibly be a really good character, and then she got killed. Right. And it was just really a shame. So yeah, they were characters who kind of got lost in the shuffle because of, to your point, that they were juggling too much. They had too many balls in the air, trying to juggle too much at once. Yeah. So it was a shame, because, you know, I'm a fan of Shannon Woodward, but it is what it is. And I think they could have, there was more there for those characters, I think. And it's just kind of a shame.
I agree. And I definitely see your point there, but I don't know, when they were on screen, or at least when Shannon Woodward's character was on screen, I didn't really have that much of a problem with her being an expository character, or being someone that drive the plot forward. Even though that is a very valid criticism for sure. I just like the way that she handled herself in those scenes. I think that she brought a life to the plot, or a life to the story, that kept it from being this dark, kind of meandering mystery show.
She was a bright spot.
Yeah.
Her character had personality.
Yeah.
A lot more personality, yeah.
Right, which unfortunately, when we lost her, we kind of lost that element to the story from my perspective.
Yeah.
And when you lose that, you kind of have a problem from a storytelling perspective, because you have a field of characters that are all very serious and driven to certain actions that don't really resonate with you, because you don't have an emotional context for them or anything. Like the Tessa Thompson character, I thought was just kind of completely wasteful of an actress who I think is really talented. She just pops up as the next board representative.
Right.
And she did nothing for me. In that whole plot line I think that that's a fault with the show, is that it was the entire show, the entire plot is pretty convoluted for me from what I can tell, because I still don't, like, I get that she was part of a board, and the board wanted to oust Ford, and before they did that, they wanted to get all of the data from the hosts and from the park to smuggle out of it before they ousted him, because he would dump all of the data to let his creation die with him. So then they smuggle it into Dolores's old father host, and then from there it's just, like, that's the end of that whole plot line. But I feel like that didn't. I don't know how that is setting up for season 2. I don't know how that is going to come into play in season 2, because right now it's left dangling, and I felt like it was asking a lot for me to really latch onto that while I have so many other concurrent storylines going on and plot elements that I need to keep track of in a show that is dense with different plot lines that I need to follow. Do you agree? How do you feel about that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I also had an issue with the Tessa Thompson character. I thought she was just a kind of a placeholder almost. Yeah. And that I understood the motivation behind their actions. Those two board people, if you will. I understood their motivations, but for whatever reason, I guess it seemed like small potatoes to me, I guess. I feel like some of the other conflict that was going on was so, like, deep and philosophical. I mean, I feel like Anthony Hopkins' character spoke only in, like, Socrates quotes. Yeah. Like, he had all these grand things to say, regardless of how mundane the conversation was. And same thing with Bernard. You know, he was a very inquisitive and deep person. But these people were basically just trying to steal code, and it was so like profit driven, and, you know, just in the pursuit of business. Whereas all these other characters, their motivations seem much deeper and personal. Yeah. And those two characters, it was just like, well, you know, we're just trying to protect our financial interests. Right. And it was a little drab. It was just a little drab. Yeah. I absolutely agree. Yeah. 100%. And that hits the nail on the head of why I didn't connect with it. Well, you mentioned you wanted to talk about Dr. Ford and his character. My question, and maybe it's, I don't know, maybe I just didn't pick up on something, but I think his motivations were a little either too simple or too complex or just not defined at all, because it seemed to me by the end of the first season, his motivation and what he was trying to achieve throughout the whole season is basically just like setting up his last story ever before he either died or left or was taken out or whatever. Or was he trying to do something? I don't know what he was trying to do necessarily. When I finished the finale, I had that exact same reaction. Like, I was like, what the hell does any of that mean? Right. The journey into night narrative, I didn't understand what the hell we were supposed to take that as when we're seeing that it's Teddy and Dolores on the beach, and it's the reveal that is the board watching the narrative that he's been working on. Yeah. Like that moment, I had no idea what the hell they were trying to say, or I had no idea what the hell that was supposed to mean. But what I think the overall plot for Ford's character, the overall arc for his character this season, and presumably for the entire series, since he got, but the whole arc for his narrative or for his storyline this season was that, and again, this is also deeply rooted in misdirect also, which I think is a fault of the show. It doesn't convey the motivations of the characters, and instead of doing that, they convey the mystery surrounding the character motivations. So that is a fault of the plot and a fault of the writing. But the arc for his character was that he was originally, to us, from our perspective, he was a character who was compassionate for the hosts, or he's compassionate for his creations. He is the John Hammond of the park, to make a Jurassic Park reference. Okay. But by the end of the season, and you get hints of a disagreement between him and his co-founder and partner Arnold, from in the past, who Arnold didn't want the park to open because he was
he realized that the hosts could become sentient. They could have their own. They could be like humans. They could achieve sentience. So that was the core disagreement between them. And then Arnold died, and then Ford opened the park, erased Arnold from existence, apparently. Because Logan in the flashback says that there was talk of another partner or another person that opened the park, but you can't find anything about him, not even a picture, but whatever. So it's set up to where they have this disagreement, and Ford opens the park after Arnold dies. But it's revealed at the end, apparently, this is what I understand of it, that Ford's whole objective was to create sentient beings or people with consciousness in the hosts. He wanted them to find the center of the maze and achieve consciousness. So when he did that with Dolores, when he achieved that with Dolores, he had her kill him the same way that Arnold had her kill him. And like his final words are, he talks about how Beethoven and Chopin, I think, they didn't die, they became their music or something.
Right.
They lived on in music. And then she kills him, and then that's the onslaught of the uprising of the hosts and everything. So that entire thing, from my perspective, how I'm understanding it, is that Ford's final narrative is the hosts overthrowing the humans.
Okay.
And that is the final narrative. Which I think opens the door for some interesting elements going forward in this series. I think it really does. I think and we can talk about further seasons later. I'll save that for later, but I think the execution of that, or the way that it was handled throughout the season, was a misstep and way too convoluted and way too mysterious for surprise sake rather than character sake.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, that was my read on it. Did you pick up on any of that? Did that when you watched it, did like my explanation of it? Because I'm going off of what I've heard in podcasts and stuff.
Okay. I thought it was Arnold who wanted the hosts to achieve sentience and overthrow the human guests, if you will. That's that goes to your point that the motivations were very muddled and convoluted all across the board. So I guess I just misinterpreted that, or
it was his intention. Like Arnold did want them to become to achieve consciousness. The mystery surrounding, or the misdirect, was that Ford didn't. But it's revealed at the end. My understanding is that it's revealed at the end that he actually was working toward achieving what Arnold started.
Okay.
Yeah. That's my understanding, at least.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. And one of the things I loved about the whole host storyline in general, and the thing about Maeve's storyline in particular, that I'll circle back and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Her ending, where she is going through Westworld, she's about to leave on the train, then she sees the baby, and she decides to stay in the park to go find her child. I thought that was really good. I thought that was really solid.
Yeah. I liked it because it was so human.
It was
such a human thing to do.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that she's a walking computer, and I don't know, she developed such a cold attitude throughout. Once she set her mind to escaping and working towards that, she became a very cold person, if you will, or her attitude was very cold. So to see that human touch from her in the end, yeah, I think it was great for her character, and I'm just curious what it's going to do for plot wise or whatever. Because I think the whole her trying to do I liked the idea of her perpetrating an uprising as opposed to just escaping. And I think the direction that plot was going was she was just going to get out and escape. And I think while that's not uninteresting, I think it would have been cool to have her raise an army of hosts and, go nuts.
Yeah.
Which is kind of happening in another part of the park with the other hosts. But still, I think that would have been cool.
I agree, and it's interesting that it's a very human reaction. That's the read that I've gotten from other sources too. It's a very human, her achieving consciousness in deciding to do that. Where my cynical ass, the whole time I'm sitting there thinking that I saw it as she's not. I saw it as the daughter host is her cornerstone memory or her keystone memory.
Right.
So that is like the thing that drives her in everything in terms of like every host needs to have a keystone memory.
Right.
So I read that decision of hers to be she's still programmed, she's still confined to her programming. She hasn't achieved true consciousness.
Right.
That's how I read it, but I think that the general consensus is that she made the human choice to stay to go get her daughter.
Yeah.
And that's in that she does have some humanity in her, and that it's supposed to counterbalance the way that Dolores achieved her consciousness, and it's kind of supposed to be two characters who reach the same level but in different ways.
Okay.
But I still like to think that maybe it's just, she's not truly human.
Yeah.
Because she's still confined to her keystone memory.
Could be a dual thing there.
Yeah.
That's cool. I'm glad you brought up the keystone memory thing, because I think that was a really cool aspect of the storytelling. I think that was a good idea. And I like how Ford goes into a description of how all of the keystone memories are rooted in pain or like suffering. And I think this is a fault of mine as a viewer, but I think that's a great idea, and like I really liked how they used it with Maeve, and with some of the other hosts, Bernard, Bernard Arnold. But I'm struggling to realize what the keystone memories are for like Dolores and Teddy. Maybe they just they just didn't reveal them, or
that's a good question. I don't know.
Maybe it's because I don't know. I was gonna say maybe it's because they don't necessarily have storylines, but they do. They do. Teddy just kind of stumbles into things. It seems like people would just bump into him. I don't know.
Teddy's motivation is Dolores. Everything he does is driven by his need to rescue Dolores. And I think Dolores is. I don't think they necessarily have the keystone memories that are in place that are rooted in suffering and all that. But I think that Dolores is that she loses her family every day at the park.
Right. Okay.
Which, going back, and this is no, I'm not going to nitpick at this. Well, I will just briefly. Again, setting up the rules of the park and the setting, it's like, I don't understand how it operates in that, like, Dolores is with William several days on their little journey out of their loop. So how many hosts are there in the park that they can replenish, like, that role or that setting with that or put someone in that place? Because if everyone is in the park and they're going through it and everyone takes a host and does their own little thing, like, where does that leave the guests to come in on Friday?
Right, exactly. I know what you're saying.
Yeah, anyway, that's a nitpick, but so Teddy's motivation is driven by Dolores, and I like the how did you feel about the Wyatt thing? Because I thought that was really again, it was something that could have hooked me in if the rest of the show up to that point had paid off for me in a way that I could really pay attention to more storylines being introduced. You know what I mean? Like, they introduced this whole thing where Ford is creating a new narrative, and there's this new introduction of a new bad guy or new antagonist, the adversary, named Wyatt, who's shrouded in mystery, and then it ends up being revealed that Dolores is Wyatt, and that's why Teddy murdered the whole village, and it was a whole thing with Arnold. And how'd you feel about all that? Just talking about it just makes my brain hurt.
Yeah, it was kind of a weird loop thing. The whole reverie thing, which was basically memories. The way it worked out was weird to me. It seemed kind of kind of clumsy, I guess. It was the Wyatt storyline ended up being the final nudge, I guess, to push the hosts towards consciousness or sentience. And I don't know. I guess it had to be there or whatever. I mean, I think it has to be in the show because I think the hosts weren't getting there on their own,
right?
And so that was like Dr. Ford's Ninth Symphony. Like, that's his crowning achievement. And I don't know. I guess they used it as it was, again, kind of a misdirect. Yeah. I think, but I don't know. I'm not really sure how I feel about it, to be honest. I think it was just kind of, it was kind of mixed up in all this stuff and kind of got lost, I think.
Sure. Yeah. I agree. It kind of came a little late in the game, I think. Which is weird because I think it comes up at like the halfway point of the season. Right. But when we're already dealing with so many different mysteries and things that aren't really connecting with me as a viewer, it's just kind of piled on a little bit. And to see that play out the way it did, it makes sense, I'm sure, when you put it on paper. Right. But it just kind of lost me a little bit there. Yeah. Let's see. Off the top of your head, is there anything more, or should we talk a little bit more about the abstract nature of the plot or anything you want to kind of talk about?
Not really. Yeah. Not necessarily.
Samurai World.
Yeah. That threw me a little bit. Really? I don't... Whatever.
Interesting.
I don't know. I haven't thought about it, really.
Okay, that's really interesting because that was one of my favorite parts of the finale. Really? Yeah. Then again, I have a propensity to enjoy samurai stuff. Right. Being half Japanese. I'm not half Japanese. That was a stupid joke. That's ridiculous. No, because I love old samurai movies. Yeah. And I liked that because there was one aspect of the movie that hadn't been touched on in this show, and that's the fact that in the movie, Westworld is one of 3 worlds. Oh, okay. There was Roman world and medieval world. So in Westworld, the show, I'm like there's a lot of like questions. Like, I wonder, is this really the only version of it? Are they just going to do Westworld, or are they going to have other worlds? And then just seeing like that SW logo and like showing the samurai, I'm like, I want to see that. I want to see that happen, even though swordplay in that world doesn't make any sense to me because it doesn't set up the rules that well in the show, from what I could tell. But still, like, that was something that really, really jumped out at me and really made me excited about the growing mythology of the show, as convoluted as it had been up to that point. But also, again, compliment and then criticism. Felix, in that scene where Maeve asks what that is, what's going on, what is this, and Felix just says it's complicated. Yeah, that bugged me because it could be one of two things. He could be saying it's too complicated to explain to you that your world that your entire existence is based around is part of another bigger thing that has other worlds. Like, that's completely, if that is what was meant by that line, I will take that and not have any complaints on it or anything. But also, it's like, okay, we get it. There's another park with with a samurai themed world. It's not that complicated, Felix. Yeah. So I kind of felt like I felt like my read on that line was that it was more like a wink at the audience, thinking like, well, it's complicated. There's a little bit more to this world that we've been growing for 10 episodes. And it felt kind of like a little too, it didn't work for me. Okay. But the idea of Samurai World is something that I really hope that the show visits in some way. Okay. So I want to get to a couple points and then we can call it a day. I want to talk about our thoughts for the series going forward and the idea of the internet and everything. That'll be separate here in a second. But before we do that, just overall thoughts on the show. Once again, like, kind of, are you excited for season 2? Are you did you come away from it looking forward to more, or was it an exhausting experience that you're kind of dreading the next season? How did you come out of it feeling?
Well, I felt better, to compare it to something, I felt better coming out of this season than I did for the second season of True Detective.
Okay.
Which I think was not very good, but
right.
Had its bright points and had its good features, but not very good television. I think this was better than that. I think this was better television than that. And while I'm not very optimistic about a potential third season of True Detective, I'm pretty optimistic about a second season of Westworld. Because again, I mentioned earlier, I think the first season had a lot of setup and establishing stuff to take care of, and maybe they were just finding their footings, and maybe the second season is going to be really good. I'm very intrigued by Jonathan Nolan's statement that the first season was about control and the second season is going to be about chaos. That is intriguing to me, and it's especially intriguing to me given the final scenes of the finale where the hosts go apeshit.
Yeah.
That's really intriguing to me, and I think it's almost like all the stuff we were watching in the first season is a build up to the true conflict that we're going to get to see in the second season. That's kind of how it felt. I'm not saying that's the direction they're going to take or that's what was intended, but it had that feel to it for me. So
okay.
I am optimistic about the second season, and I am looking forward to it. The first season, I'd probably give it like a middle 6 out of 10. Because again, there's still a lot of things I liked about it, and I still looked forward to watching the episodes every week, and I didn't wait, I didn't let them build up very much or anything, so I was still interested and intrigued every week. So I am still involved in the show. I'm going to keep watching it, and I hope it gets really good. I hope next season I can give it an 8 or 9 out of 10, but that remains to be seen.
I agree with you, and hopefully they will definitely build up to a great season 2 or make a great season 2. And they've said that it's likely going to be second season likely won't be airing until 2018 anyway. So so they'll have time, and it has been renewed and everything.
Okay.
Overall, I feel like I was kind of harsh on this show in this episode, but I can't let go of some of the issues I had with it.
Yeah.
I mentioned last week on the podcast that in terms of science fiction, when it comes to science fiction, I'm kind of a harsher critic than with other genres, and that's not Westworld doesn't get a pass for me from that.
Yeah.
And I love that the concept is being explored on HBO. I love that this exists, and there were moments throughout it that I really, really liked and really latched onto and was really enthralled by. The issues with the storytelling and the writing and the kind of structure of the entire season will make me kind of rate it around the same place you did, about 6.5 out of 10.
Okay.
But I think that I think that this could have potential for a great show going forward. I think that by what Jonathan Nolan said about it being about control in the first season and chaos in the second season, I think that could make for a really fun and entertaining and thrilling second season. And I hope that they handle that in a way that is less convoluted and more character based than anything. I would love to, because I think that part of the problem that I have with it, and part of the reason why I'm kind of I'm not as optimistic about it. Like, I'm sure that it will deliver and be entertaining, but I think that they showed that they are a little bit more driven by the puzzle of it all rather than the characters. Like, I would have much rather had a first season that delved into the characters of the characterization of the people involved in the show, both the humans and the hosts, so that when we get to the second season where there's this big uprising of hosts that are taking out and murdering humans, there would be more at stake from an emotional level for the viewer. I would have loved to have seen more of a morally gray, and we did get this morally gray Man in Black, or I wish that we would have had a more dark character from him, so that, like, my idea is that I would hope that he would become kind of like this John McClane hero in season 2. And I feel like that would be more satisfying if he wasn't this character that we got 10 hours worth of backstory on, about him being like a decent person and then transforming into the Man in Black, who is a pretty mean person.
Yeah.
But you don't really get the sense that he is like a truly evil character or anything like that. There are some things here and there that, like, he says that he has a tragic backstory where his wife a year before had killed herself because she saw a darkness in him, which was engaging. That was an interesting backstory, and that was something that I enjoyed that they wrote in for that character. But also, you don't really get the sense that he is this villainous character. So I kind of wish that there was a little bit more character trajectory in terms of character story and characterization.
Foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So, having said that, I think that the show roughly laid a foundation, and I think that they can build upon that pretty well, and hopefully that shaky foundation doesn't collapse and just bring everything down in seasons to come.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think it could be good. And maybe I'll have a more enhanced viewpoint of this season if I go back and revisit it. Having said that, Tiny, where do you think the show can go from here?
I don't know. It seems you mentioned that you're glad it exists, and I feel the same way. I think that's a good way to put it. Mm-hmm. I love the premise of the show.
Yeah.
This whole exploration of consciousness and sentience and the morality or lack thereof of essentially creating a new species, if you will. I think there's some very entertaining and thought-provoking concepts and philosophies involved with that kind of storytelling. So I'm just intrigued by that in general. Mm-hmm. But I think that's why when we first started the episode, I think it would have been cool, or I'd be curious to see how this story would have been structured as a 10-part miniseries. Mm-hmm. Would this first season have been 3 episodes long, or would it have been 5, or would it have been 1? Or like I'm just curious, what is the grand scheme of this story? Yeah. And now that we have the setups all there, and we have, by all appearances, entered the main conflict. It has started with the final scenes of the first season finale. Mm-hmm. Do you sustain that over 3 seasons, or does that conflict conclude at the end of season 2 and we get something else? I don't know. As far as what the future of the show holds, I don't know. I guess I'm not imaginative enough to see where this is going in on a grand scale anyways. I don't know, but like I said, I'm intrigued, and I hope it doesn't suck.
Nice. I agree. Do you want to hear where I kind of think or hope that it could go that would be satisfying to me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I would really like to see, and this is not how it's going to be, but I think that if the show were to explore the themes that I liked most about it, it could do so in a really interesting way. If they had like a multi-season plan where second season is all about this conflict between the humans and the hosts, and I would like to see it, kind of end with the hosts overtaking everything.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and I would love if that brought about, like, theoretically, I'm going season by season, so I mean, it probably wouldn't shake out this cleanly, but I would like to see like season 2 be about that conflict and the hosts prevailing and winning, everyone gaining consciousness, and then I would like to see the show from that point go forward by showing this society of artificial intelligent hosts. living and coexisting in this park that they've murdered all the humans and they're living there.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to see the interplay between them, because they've laid some groundwork for that, in that they could have the character of Abernathy, Dolores' old father, that they have the code in. And I don't know in the confines of the show how this would work out, or if this tracks with what has been set up. But I think that would be an interesting thing to see, that like these characters or these hosts could form this society where they saw God get murdered. Their God get murdered, their creator get murdered. So they could have this whole religious thing that are worshiping the memory of Ford. And at the heart of that, they could have Abernathy as the preacher, because he had, one of his backstories was that he was a professor that brought in cannibals into a camp or something like that. He was a preacher that was, or a professor. That was the origin of him having this Shakespeare quote in the first episode. And now he has this code, and I feel like this could be him, like his consciousness could be him creating a religion for the hosts and stuff, and them kind of latching on to that, and then eventually breeding conflict between hosts, and it kind of having this very character-based conflict between ideologies in this society that's new and unproven or untested. I think that if the show goes into that kind of exploration of humanity by way of artificial intelligence recreating or achieving society, in figuring out, like using that as kind of a launch pad to explore like what's wrong with society, or why we fail at certain aspects of things, I think that could be a really engaging plot line and a really engaging storyline for the show to explore. I don't know how they could do that and have it be a long-standing or long-running series. I don't know how they can, if they would be able to pull that off. But I think that they could do it, and I would be satisfied if they went that route.
That sounds great.
Thank you.
That's not like you've thought about this.
A little bit, yeah.
I haven't put that much thought into it. So yeah, that sounds great. I hope that's something I thought about. Basically, the second step you mentioned, and you went to like step 8. I hadn't thought of steps 3 through 8. That's really good. Yeah, I hope that happens too.
To be fair, the show left me with thoughts of how can the show be better.
Yeah, true.
So there's that.
Yeah.
So let's see. Before we go, I want to talk to you, Tiny. Do you have time?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to talk to you about the internet.
Oh yeah.
Kind of, there's this whole thing where the internet culture, fan theorizing online has reached a point where it's every episode, every scene, every moment of a show is scrutinized every week, and it's broken down to its minutia by a hive mind of people who are obsessing over it. And for a lot of people, that works great. Like that enhances their experience. But I think that what Westworld Season 1 proved to me was that I've reached a point where I just can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I just can't do it. It was something that I actively participated in when Lost was airing, and I got a lot of enjoyment out of that. Lost is one of my favorite shows, and like we spent hours while that show was on the air discussing what we thought it was going to lead to. So, in theorizing about the different clues and hints and everything. But with Westworld, and I don't know, my conflict is I don't know if my issues with Westworld are because I was cognizant of the conversation around it while it was airing. I don't know if that contributed to me not liking it that much, or if, to draw a sharper comparison to Lost, or if the mystery of Westworld was at the expense of characterization, whereas Lost had really incredible characters and really strongly written characters, so that even though the mystery was dominating the conversation around it, you still had character moments that resonated and tracked throughout the seasons. Whereas Westworld, I couldn't latch on to the characters. So my question to you, Tiny, is how do you feel about the idea of internet culture and internet water cooler talk?
I've never been a big fan of it, and I think the reason is because I've never participated in it very much, including Lost. I didn't participate in that.
I kind of drew you into it a little bit.
Yeah. But I feel like in-person discussion, like what we do, like what we're doing right now, is substantially different. Like a true water cooler discussion is substantially different than a message board or a discussion board on a website, because an idea is shared, and it's kind of an idea is shared at a water cooler, and it just kind of hangs there, and you talk about it for a minute, and then you move on. But with there's no moving on the internet. It's like someone introduces an idea, and it gets harped on by that person and others, and it's just like it, and it stays there, and the internet is forever. And it's like, I don't know, it's like, it's hard to articulate it, but I'm not a big fan of it, because I feel like it's a lot of self-aggrandizing. I feel like there's a lot of people who they like to participate in those kind of discussions on those message boards because they like to make their point and move on, or do something else. They like to demonstrate how smart they are, or like, oh, I think this is what's happening and this is what it is, and I'm smart and you're all dumb. And the anonymity of the internet plays into that to an effect, but I've just never really participated in it, and I'm annoyed by it because it's turned into an institution, and there are websites devoted to that concept. Like, BuzzFeed shares a freaking article, quote unquote article, about The Walking Dead every single week, where it's like, did you notice this, or this means this, or this character's gonna do this? And it's just like, it's every week, and it's like, I don't care, or it's like, I don't know.
Actively participating in anything, and that being outside of that conversation is frustrating, because and that's the same with me, is that, like, if I were outside, like, I want to appreciate art for what it is. I don't want to dissect it until afterwards, and we spend 2 hours talking about it on a podcast. But to your point, the idea, like, I completely agree about, when you're talking at a water cooler, the idea just fades away. But Tiny, to kind of bring this back to the Nolan aspect of it, what's the most resilient parasite?
An idea.
Yeah. It's to quote Inception.
Right.
Yeah. And that is what the internet is. It's a freaking parasite. No, it's a parasite. No, it's you're right. If there is something that's there, it's going to be scrutinized to no end by hundreds, if not thousands, of people,
and it goes viral, and you're forced to participate in it. That's what annoys me, is that I can't open any kind of social media platform without being forced into a discussion that strangers are having about The Walking Dead, or Westworld, whatever, and insert show here. Exactly,
and that's, in some cases, that's okay. Throughout Westworld, throughout my viewing of Westworld, I listened to 2 podcasts. One was a podcast that's been sponsoring our episodes for the last couple months, Westworld FM from the Midwest Podcast Network, which this is going to sound like such a, what's the word I'm looking? This is going to sound like it's because they've been paying us money to sponsor our episodes, but it's not. They are the better of the 2 podcasts that I've listened to, and they do a lot of the deep dive into theorizing and everything. But I will say that it's a high quality, entertaining discussion and everything. But next season, when I watch the show, I'm going to watch it in a vacuum. I'm not going to consume anything. When I'm done, I'm going to go back and listen to it and see all the wacky stuff, everything. But it's just, the other podcast I listened to was Decoding Westworld, and like, there are moments where one of the hosts were, like, at the end of it, I won't single them out, but at the end of the season, I heard people talking about how they reacted to the reveal of William being the Man in Black, a younger version of him. And there was one, I don't remember the exact example, but I heard one person say that, well, that scene, there's a scene with the Man in Black or William where he does something and it's not, what's the word I'm looking for? They referred to it as it was okay, but like there was an inconsistency in a character moment, but it was okay because we didn't have the full idea of what that character was. We didn't know at that time for sure that the Man in Black was William. So it's forgivable for them not to have this bizarre character moment. I'm sorry that I'm vague. I don't remember the exact circumstances, but the crux of the argument was that it's okay for them not to be written, for William's character, for Jimmy Simpson's version of the Man in Black, for him not to be written that well or vice versa, because later on we find out that he is the backstory for this character, that those characters are intertwined and everything. And I feel like that is just such a cop-out. I think that is excusing poor writing, because if we don't know that this is the character's backstory, if we don't know for sure that one character is connected to another one, that doesn't excuse the fact that they can write it poorly or not have it track that well or have a somewhat meandering plot line with a character solely because later on it's going to pay off by revealing that he's tied to a central character. I think that is a cop-out, and I think that that's excusing poor storytelling. Are you following what I'm saying, Al?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, yeah. I agree.
Yeah. And I think that just the conversation surrounding it, I wish that more of the conversation was about the quality of the show or the faults of the show even, then does this mean this? We'll find out in 4 weeks. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's kind of, it depletes my enjoyment of the show because it makes me focus on what I don't want to focus on, in that I kind of want the story to just present itself to me. And some people are fine with it being a mystery box that is slowly revealing itself for the mystery and everything. But I feel like that if it's dense with mystery and it's not as dense with characterization, which there was some good characterization, Bernard and Maeve and Dolores, I guess. Like there was some good characterization, but I feel like as a show juggling so many mysteries, I think that it faltered in that it didn't have characters that I was really latched onto, and I think that that's a fault in the writing. Yeah,
that's fair. I agree. I agree with that to an extent.
Yeah. So anyway, internet theorizing, and I understand, as I said before, I was a huge fan of Lost. This is the exact same scenario. Like, these shows I feel are comparable in that they are science fiction based mystery shows about a mysterious world, both produced by J.J. Abrams. And the mystery is commanding the conversation surrounding it. But as I said before, also Lost's characters were much more engaging, and they were much more the focal point of the show than the mysteries ever were for me. And even if they weren't for the majority of the audience, and if the majority of the audience falter or thought that the end finale of Lost was bad because of that, because they didn't focus on the mysteries, that's entitled to their opinion and everything. I just think that it was more character based, and I wish that Westworld was more character based, because if you don't want to participate in the mystery, or if you don't want to participate in theorizing, it doesn't give you enough characterization to really appreciate it. And I think that that's a fault of the show.
Agreed.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I thought that the conversation about internet would be a little more interesting, but I kind of made my points pretty quickly.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and it's not to say that people that spend a lot of time theorizing are wrong, but I mean, like, I also got kind of irritated with Breaking Bad. So, well, I guess not irritated would be too strong a word, but I got kind of bothered by how closely people were scrutinizing Breaking Bad, saying like, well, okay, well, if you look at the placement of this table, and granted, the Breaking Bad set design was very much focused on a lot of little hints here and there.
Yeah.
But it was also like, they were putting in too much work. It's the nature of television today.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that part of what I think works for entertainment is the Netflix model, having a show go all at once so that you don't have the week-to-week theorizing.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But anyway, Tiny, any closing thoughts on that or Westworld or anything?
I took to calling it Breast World after a while because of all the nudity. And I think it's fundamental, or not necessarily fun to mention, but I think it's worth mentioning that I feel like the nudity was pretty balanced. Mm-hmm. A lot of dongs, a lot of butts, a lot of boobs. Like, it was all, it's not like they just, like, well, let's show this hot naked chick next. You know, it was like, nudity tends to skew very exploitatively towards women throughout the history of Hollywood and TV and stuff like that. But a lot of dongs, a lot of male butts in the show. I noticed that throughout it. I don't know if it's good or bad or whatever, but I noticed that and I thought it was noteworthy.
I agree. Yeah, I'll agree with that. I wasn't bothered by. I didn't find the nudity to be exploitative as much as past HBO shows were,
and it wasn't even sexual.
Yeah,
90% of the time.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think it played a role in the plot to an extent, or it played a role in the show. It wasn't just nudity for nudity's sake. It played a role in the show, and I think it made sense.
I agree. Yep. And let's see if that's all. I think we can kind of close down the episode.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Once again, thank you for listening, first of all, and also thank you to Westworld FM for sponsoring the episodes, sponsoring our episodes recently while they've been running. It's a great podcast. If you're into the theorizing, or if you're into talking about the show in general, I suggest going back and listening to that. I don't know if they actually listen to the podcast, but thank you guys for sponsoring us, and I really enjoyed your show despite my proclamations about not being into the internet discussion. I think that they had more to say about the show itself while also dealing with the theorizing and everything. And that's something I really appreciate about that podcast. So it's a good podcast. If you want more Westworld discussion, go and check them out at westworld.fm. And let's see, Tiny, what are we doing next week?
I don't know.
You don't know?
Are we taking that week off?
No, this week we're...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Next week, we're reviewing the new Star Wars movie.
Yes, we are. Rogue One, a Star Wars story.
Yep.
And do you know what I've been doing to prepare for it?
Watching the other movies?
No, I watched Star Trek 1 through 5, which I'll talk about in
not preparing for it.
No, I did send a picture to Fecus when I was starting Star Trek the motion picture. I was like, getting ready for Rogue One, just to be a dick.
That's great.
And then I ended up watching, and I don't remember if I mentioned this on the podcast before, I ended up watching like Star Trek 1 through 4 on that like a day. Mm-hmm. So I'll have to watch something to prepare for Star Wars. But anyway, yeah.
I'm not doing anything to prepare for it, so.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're going to be reviewing Rogue One, a Star Wars story next week. Be sure to come check that out. We're going to have a guest for it, so that should be fun. And yeah, if you like what you hear and you want to help support the podcast, I didn't mention that before, please go to iTunes and leave a rating and review. It takes like 5 seconds. You don't even need to write a complete sentence. You can just write gibberish. Whatever. As long as it's a 5-star rating, I don't care what it says.
It's really important to us, guys.
It is. It is. Here's a challenge. Go on iTunes, write a review, and in the review, say your deepest, darkest secret. But no, it's a really easy way to support us, and it's really appreciated. And it shows that people listen to us and enjoy our podcast, so that people looking for, a movie and TV podcast, they will find us in the haystack of just thousands, literally thousands of movie podcasts.
Yeah.
And if you want to show your support with your wallet, which, I mean, it is the holiday season, guys, just saying, you can do that by clicking the donate button on obsessiveviewer.com or the donate link in the show notes of this episode. That way you can make a one-time donation or a recurring donation. Or if you want to be more fun, you can become a patron at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer, where you can choose from several different reward tiers on a monthly basis. Any donations made will go directly toward the little checking account that I have for the fees to keep the podcast running and to keep the, equipment up to date and everything. So any donation made is greatly appreciated, and we hope to have some Christmas presents from you guys, just saying.
Yeah.
So anyway, having said all that, I think we're done for this bonus episode.
Yep.
And thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next time for Rogue One, A Star Wars Story.
Thanks, guys.
So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into... Oh, man. Really?
What?
Oh, Alan Thicke died.
Oh, wow.
That's a bummer.
That is a shame. He wasn't that old, was he? 60s?
Yeah, he was 69.
Wow.
And apparently he had a heart attack. He was playing hockey with his 19-year-old son.
Jeez.
I think he was supposed to be at I think he was at Heartland this year.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, that's a bummer.
That is a shame.
Yeah. Huh. Anyway, oh, that's a bummer. Anyway, and I guess he made an appearance on Fuller House this season.
Wow.
Which I think we're going to do another bonus episode with Sam. Yeah. I am. If you want to watch season 2 of Fuller House, by all means.
I'm good.
Okay. So,
Thank you for listening to The Obsessive Viewer, presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. You can find more of our episodes at ovpodcast.com, and you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Stitcher, or your preferred podcast app. The Obsessive Viewer's theme song is An Eclipse of Events and is provided by Loudlike from their EP Mistakes We Must Make. You can find that and more great music from them on iTunes and like their Facebook page at facebook.com/loudlikemusic. Any and all feedback on the podcast is encouraged. You can email the hosts individually at Matt, Tiny, or Mike at obsessiveviewer.com, or send an email to the podcast in general at podcast@obsessiveviewer.com. Check out the Obsessive Viewer blog at obsessiveviewer.com, where we post movie and TV reviews and the occasional editorial about the business of entertainment. You can also like us on Facebook at facebook.com/theobsessiveviewer and follow us on Twitter at obsessiveviewer, at obsessivetiny, and at IamMikeWhite. If you want more obsessive content in your life, check out our sister site, obsessivebooknerd.com, for book reviews, author spotlights, and a general celebration of reading. Finally, if you're philosophically curious, check out Tiny's side project podcast, The Secular Perspective, which explores the concepts of faith, religion, and existence from the perspective of secular hosts. You can find that at thesecularperspective.com and subscribe to the podcast on the podcatcher of your choice. Again, thank you so much for listening. We love you. Be excellent to each other.